as depression. Depression's the new term. And oh boy, does that upset people when I mention the word depression. I mean, those people who are diagnosed with chronic depression want to do this. Bring it on. Bring it on. I don't have self-pity. I have a brain that's screwed up. Well, you know what? I'm not here arguing that point. I'm just saying, watch out, guys, because those bedevilments will get any physician to tell you you're chronically depressed. I don't know if you are or not. That's not my job. But I can certainly give you the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, and it could very well be self-pity. Okay? And so, I mean, when I went through my husband dying, oh, those doctors, I mean, they were throwing antidepressants at me, and it was situational depression. You know, I mean, God darn it, as much as I hate to tell you guys, life and death is a part of the deal. And I mean, it doesn't, don't think I'm downplaying death. Oh, that is, whew. But, so it says, what is the basic trouble? Is he not really a self-seeker even when trying to be kind? Is that not unbelievable? See, I'm always self. It says, is he not a victim? Here's the tattoo on the backside. Is he not a victim of the delusion that he can wrest satisfaction and happiness out of this world if he only manages well? The word rest, W-R-E-S-T, you might want to put above this in your big book, means to seize by force, violently twist. You know what that reminds me of? Have y'all ever gotten in a physical brawl with anybody? Yeah, okay. I am in a room full of alcoholics, right? Come on. Yeah, man. I mean, when I think of that, I just think of that just going down. I mean, I'm going to take you and I am going to make you see it my way. That's what I do in life, right? Rest. Twist, wrench, force, form of violence, distort, turn from its natural meaning, pervert, or pervert.
No, pervert.
Only a room full. You know what's so funny, too? I was thinking about this yesterday. I was thinking, the stories that Chris was sharing about his drunk driving, we're cracking up laughing, right? Now, if this was the church congregation in here, you know their reaction? See, we're outright mental defects, and I'm kind of proud of that. Okay, So, and I know that some of you guys are getting antsy. Just hang in there with me 10 more minutes, because this third step is powerful. So it says, and I'm doing okay, Robert, with 10 more minutes? Okay, good, I'm in. Okay, so so now here we go. It says, is it not evident to all the rest of the players that these are the things he wants? How many of you guys work with sponsees? Raise your hand. Yeah. How many have y'all realized when your sponsees working you? Yeah, when they call you and they go, well, I really couldn't make it because I really needed this, blah, 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 blah. See, is it not evident to all the rest of the players? You're like going, oh, for God's sakes. And here's the deal. I am absolutely blinded to it when I'm doing it to my sponsor. Because I'm doing it to my sponsor, and she calls me out just like I call my sponsees out. See, it's the beauty of this deal. God says, boy, you drunks need a little extra help. Whew. You really need to lean on each other, because you are just the blind leading the blind right now. You know, so that's why we need each other. That's why if I go, I'm not knocking, going to other religious organizations, but if you take your problems, they don't get us. They don't get us. They're going to say, you absolutely need to do that. Yes, you go ahead and do that. Oh, that can be some of the most dangerous stuff for we alcoholics, is to have somebody co-sign our BS, right? So I got to always bring it back to me, always bring it back to me. So it goes into the whole deal, and I want to flip over to this because we're kind of getting tight on the time. Page 62 is getting ready to tell me the root of my problems. I'm going to wind it up on this one, guys, because the truth of the matter is if you take somebody from the second step down on their knees and you do not explain what self-will looks like, they are going to be the victim of the delusion they can wrest satisfaction and happiness out of this world if they just manage well. Because they're going to make what Charlie said, alcohol is the problem. Alcohol is actually the solution because the pain's so great. It's the pain. When I drank, The first time, it fixed the problem. I didn't realize I had one. I knew I didn't feel right. What the 12 steps do when the alcohol is removed, it begins to fix that malady. And it takes care of the problem. We don't take alcohol through the steps. We take self through the step, right? So here it says, this, page 62, selfishness and self-centeredness. Now, I always thought that meant stingy and conceited. So I just jumped over that. Well, I'm not either one of them. Not those. Darn it. So I didn't get what that meant. Selfish and self-centered means all I can think about is me. How is that going to affect me? Me. I mean anything. There's only 3 checkers at the grocery store. I'm not going to get through the line fast enough. I'm not thinking about the woman that's got 2 small children that the kids are losing it behind me. I'm thinking about me. My son comes home from school and says, Mom, I'm failing. How's that going to affect me? See, I'd love to say I'm worried about him. And if any of us in this room say that, then you ain't an alcoholic. Because the truth is I'm worried about him, but he's about 4th on my list. I'm worried about how that's going to affect me. I'm going to have to take him to a tutor. I'm going to have to work harder on this homework. I. See, guys, that's what I'm trying to get you to. See, you've got to get selfish and self-centered. You'll hear later what that little one-liner was. Selfish and self-centered, that we think is our trouble. See, right now, I may be touching somebody in this room greatly, but one of you guys wants to smoke so bad, you don't want to sit here any longer, right? But the person next to you is like hanging on every word of this. I'm not thinking about you getting well. I need a cigarette now. See, that's how selfishness and self-centeredness shows up. How many of y'all are just, you get a call from a sponsee and you go, and they're crying, they're really upset. And they're like, great, I was just getting ready to sit down and watch TV. Turn it. And then Charlie goes, I'm going to go ahead and turn it on anyway. Don't you dare turn it on without me. She is quiet. She's quiet. So, it is not about, you know what, honey, you go ahead and turn that TV on, you watch that program. Oh, I am being robbed. So, that's how this deal comes up. Well, it says that we think is the root of our trouble. Well, I like to explain it like a tree. So you got a huge redwood. You got this incredible root system. Well, I can't see the roots. If I told you go get rid of that tree, you'd cut it down, right? Tree's gone, Katie. Oh, no. It may not ever really grow again, but it's got big old root system. I mean, I need the whole thing out of there. Oh, that changes the dynamics of everything, man. That's going to be very difficult. I don't know that we're going to be able to get down to that root system without this huge machine and blah, 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 blah. So it says the root of our trouble. It's driven by 100 forms of fear. Well, 100 forms of fear, guys, I don't know. And once again, a room full of women, you guys are going to get this. How many of y'all have ever been in a moving vehicle that you need out of now? Oh, yeah. Women are like, oh, right there. Where you're looking at the guy going, pull over, pull over, pull over. And you're thinking, maybe I could jump. Oh, yeah. And Charlie always goes, Kate, I don't think everybody gets that. How many in here understand what I'm talking about? Yeah, women. Women get that one. Pull over the car now. And then you think, maybe I can jump far enough to where the wheel won't hit me. Now, all you are is mad. You need out. But you're willing to risk your life because that's how we think, right? Now, when it talks about driven by fear, that's the drive. That feeling at that moment where you're like, you got to get, that's the same feeling that fear drives me. And that fear drives me, and this is what the head does. It goes, and I need out of here. I need out of this. I got to get, somebody can make a phone call and go, your mom called. What'd she say? I don't know. She just called. That's it. That's all I have to go on. I mean, I got some conflict with mom, right? So here's the way that plays out. Because we are driven by fear. And it says, driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion. So the mind begins to think, my mother called because my sister's sick, or one of the kids is sick, or maybe she's sick, or maybe she's pissed, or maybe she realized I stole that money, or, all down the delusional road. Then we go into self-seeking. Well, I better call my sister to find out what my mother wanted. And then and then we go into the whole self-seeking motive, right? We're going to do whatever we can. Maybe I can call my dad and just kind of go, hey, is mom okay? And then we go into self-pity. We step on the toes of our fellows. They retaliate, seeming without provocation. Because, see, we went based on this delusion, guys. This delusion that I didn't even leave my chair. I just got a piece of information. Just a piece of information. How many of y'all have ever gotten a letter in the mail and you go, ooh, you don't even open it. You don't even know exactly what it's saying. And you go through every emotion of what it might be, and the fear is gripping you and stopping you. See, everything, the longer you're sober, you'll begin to realize resentment is hardly any piece of it. Yeah, I'm angry, I'm afraid. I'm afraid. I'm afraid. I'm afraid of everything. I'm afraid of success. I'm afraid of failure. I'm afraid of being honest. I'm afraid of dishonesty. I'm afraid of everything, and that's the truth of the matter. See, because that is the death of self is the key here. And so this is exactly how the deal goes. So our troubles, we think, are basically of our own making. They arise out of ourself, and the alcoholic is an extreme example of self-will run riot, though he doesn't usually think so. And I've never been in a riot. I've watched them on TV. But don't they look pretty scary? You don't know where the bullets are coming from. You don't know where the Molotov cocktail's coming from. You don't know where the beer bottle's coming from. I mean, and we don't even know we're in it. And once again, when you work with others, you'll hear that insanity, that level of self-will run riot in a sponsee. And here's the deal. I got it too. See, I always think of, oh yeah. And the second half of the third step prayer is my favorite. Take away my difficulties so that victory over them doesn't make Katie feel better, may bear witness to those I would help. Take away this pain of loss so that I can help somebody. Because see, take away this pain of what it felt like to not have my children, that I lost a job, that I broke up in a relationship. My girlfriend's upset with me, right? I bounce checks, whatever. Take away my debt so that victory over them can bear witness to those I can help. And then it says, and I'll wrap it up with this, it says, God makes that possible. This whole page talks about self, and then it says 4 words, God makes that possible, and there often seems no way of entirely getting rid of self without his aid. Many of us had moral and philosophical convictions galore, but we couldn't live up to them but we could not live up to them even though we would have liked to. Now here's what people think, and they get this confused because of meeting-based sobriety. Neither could we reduce our self-centeredness much by wishing or trying on our own power. See, you can't be less selfish. We're not talking about giving somebody a piece of your pie. That's not the selfishness we're talking about. All I can think about is me. See, that's the selfishness we're talking about. I always laugh when people say, I've been working on my character defects. Oh, how's that going? Boy, that probably looks great. Oh, and here it is. This is the how and the why of it. Yep. And so it talks about us quit playing God, and then it goes up here into the page 63. And here's the deal we got to make with God. When you get married, you make a deal to be faithful, stick with them through thick and thin, and sickness and in health, right? Would you agree those are your 3 terms? Yeah. You break those terms, you kind of going to probably be breaking the deal, right? So you go to a job, they say you got to show up 8 to 5, you got to answer the phone, you show up at 9:30, you're kind of breaking the deal, wouldn't you say? Yeah, your odds of keeping the job are slim. God says 2 terms. That's all I ask of you, right? The 2 terms are, right here, it says, when we took such a position, all sorts of remarkable things followed. We had a new employer being all-powerful. He provided what we needed if we kept close to Him and performed His work well. So in order to stay close to God, we got to clear out this debris, which is 4 through 9, right? We got to stay in 10 and 11 and perform His work well. We got to do the 12th step. We got to help His kids. That's all He's asking. He's going to take care of the job, the kids, all this. Now, granted, I got to show up to work. But He's just saying, you do these things. And I'm telling you, you guys, you look over here and your life is remarkable when you stay close to Him and perform His work well. Thanks. I knew that ran a long time.
Okay. I'm just going to do a quick recap of what, and this is what caused a lot of friction in our relationship. There was one time when I started doing a little recap, she goes, "Are you recapping what I just said?" But I want to point out, in step one, let's just go over what we did. In step one, we understand now that I've got this hopeless condition of mind and body. The reason I talk about the importance of that, I'm not even going to be interested in the power in step two until I'm convinced that my own power is not going to get the job done. But when I understand that on my own power I got no shot, then the power gets real interesting. Does that make sense? So that we don't have, the reason we say we don't spend a lot of time on step two is because if the guy is still thinking his power, the moment that I become convinced that my own power ain't going to get it done, then I'm more willing to at least say that maybe there is something in step two that'll do it. I used to think that if 0 was no God belief at all and 100 was total God consciousness, that I had to get all the way over to God consciousness before I could do step two. But all the book says is, am I willing to believe that there might be something to the right of 0? Does that make sense? Just, am I willing to believe that possibly? And a friend of mine says, can you prove there is no God? And even the agnostic will go, well, no, I can't prove that there isn't a God. Well, that in itself proves that there might be. If you can't prove there isn't, and he's saying, but you can't prove there is. I go, but you can't prove there isn't, so there might be. Well, it says that's all I need for a foundation to get this thing going. But the reason we like to pound 1, 2, and 3 so hard is because the book takes that big right turn there on page 60 that I missed for a long time in recovery. And that's what Katie was just talking about, is that it stops talking about alcohol right there and it switches over into self. And we'll talk more about that in the 4th step and the 5th step, but the whole work is about self. It's not, it turns out that alcohol never really was my problem, that it was self. And alcohol was the only thing I'd ever found that eased the pain of trying to live a life based completely in self. So we're gonna. I know it is time to go outside, and we'll start this up when we do 4, 5, 6, and 7 a little later. Thanks for being so patient today. Thank you. The big book, the steps, the program, and especially you, God. We ask that we may have a truly open mind, so we might have a new experience. Please help us see the truth. Amen. Everybody back from lunch? Raise your hand if you're not here. Okay. Yeah. We're back now. We're going to start with the second session of today, and we're going to try to cover 4, 5, 6, and 7. And it's funny. We keep pounding. Chris has already given 2 terrific talks. I can't tell you. We get excited to come spend a weekend with Chris. So, this is a treat for us all the way around. We have a great time doing this stuff. And I want to stress how grateful we are to get to be here this weekend. It's our first time in Kentuckiana. I never even heard the phrase before this weekend, but whether it's Louisville or in fact, I was telling everybody, when I grew up with Louisville Sluggers, but then it took me a while to figure out that the people from Kentucky, it has to just kind of barely run out of your mouth when you say it. They go, I'm from Louisville. So, but I'm getting it. but we're not in Kentucky. Part of the reason we pound step one, so badly, is that we are. I don't think, as people, as drunks, I don't think we've ever. Has anybody ever walked into an AA meeting when you're brand new and looked up at the steps on the wall? You know how they have those window shades that have the 12 steps on them? Did any of y'all come in and sit down and look at that? You're trashed. Everything is destroyed. My people hate me. I got legal charges piling up. Did anybody walk in and look up at that thing on the wall and go, that ought to work? Yeah, I think that'll do it. And the other thing is, it's just like I don't ever remember being at a bar and having the bartender come along and say, "Can I get you something else?" And me going, "No, I think I'm good. I'm fine. Yeah, I'll be good." We didn't tell you our day yesterday. I'm going to take just a second, with this, but my God, I told you briefly that I was in a plane crash in 2003. The short version was that I chartered a plane from Long Island to fly into New York City, and we got 3,000 feet up in the air, and this was July 20th of 2003. And we got about 3,000 feet up in the air, and the engine quit, like somebody had turned the key off. And I'm in the co-pilot seat, and I put this headset on, and I hear the pilot there saying, "You're cleared to Gabretzky," and there's an airport right there. And he says, "You don't understand. I've lost engine power. We can't make land. We're going to have to ditch." And I'm like, "What?" And first time I ever chartered a plane in my life, and we're going in the drink, because we're out over the Peconic Bay, and we're not going to make that runway, and we're not even going to clear the trees, so we got to have to set it down in the water. Well, anyway, that was not much of an airplane, but it was a really crappy boat. We hit the water, and you're going, my God, I think we're okay. And about that time, I could feel water going. And by the time I had a chance to think about it, you got to get some air. I went up, and there was nothing but water and that aluminum. And that's when I thought, so that's it. I die in this airplane. Because the door wouldn't open and all this. Well, long story short, if that's possible at this point, we all get out of the plane. Well, so let me tell you how my day goes yesterday. We're getting dressed. We've packed the night before, and we got an early flight to fly up here. But we're doing last minute stuff. Katie takes a little longer to get ready than I did, but she turns out a lot better than I do. So we get up and we're getting ready, and my phone rings, and it's my next door neighbor. I go, "Hey," and he goes, it's his wife, and she says, "Did you know the window's broken out of your car?" I said, did not know that. And my briefcase is my whole world, and I go out there, and not my whole world, but it's my whole business world. I can do business from anywhere if I got my cell phone and my briefcase. When my briefcase is gone, it's like burning down somebody's office. Plus it had $1,000 in it because we just got back from Vegas, and my camera and a cell phone. So it's like, oh no. And I go out there, and of course the first thing I look for is the briefcase, and it's gone. And that gets us a little screwed up, and I'm out there, so we forget, Katie forgot all her hair products and all this stuff, but we're trying to, and I'm out there sweeping glass and talking to my neighbor on the phone, and I look, and leaning up against the fence is my black leather briefcase. And they had taken it out of the car and gone through it right there at the fence. And I've taken it out, and there's my recorder, there's my Bluetooth, there's all my files. That was the biggest deal. And I go to this little zipper pocket, and there's an envelope with 10 $100 bills in it, And I thought, well, yeah. And I thought, well, but let me tell you, I went to the moon and back during that 20 minutes, between the windows broke, and, because on an average day, replacing a window in your car and a camera is not good news, but we kind of backed into it this way because it's like, yeah, I'd do anything just to get the files back, and then there it is, and the money. Well, then we get on a plane. We get off the plane. I'm not myself for a couple hours after I get off a plane anymore. And then Candy picks us up at the airport, and we have a nice lunch, and we pick up Chris, and we come here. So we got Candy, and we got Chris, and we got Katie, and we got Charlie, and I think Julie was with us by that time, and Karen. And 3 huge suitcases, and we get on an elevator about the size of a phone book. I've discovered a lot of new phone booth is what I meant to say. And it gets halfway up and stops. And it is 90 degrees in there, and it's still, the air ain't moving, and they're going, everybody's like, and I go, because ever since being trapped in that plane, things are a little different. And I go, you want to hear understatement? I go, I'm kind of freaking out here a little bit, and Katie could look at me and tell he's not freaking out a little bit, and then, but anyway, what was it? But was it 2 minutes, 3 minutes, you think?
3 minutes.
It was some of the longest minutes of my life.
Yeah.
But so that's what brought us here yesterday. And so, I mean, because by the time they got that thing to come down, I am soaking wet with sweat. And, it's one of those things where I'm like, somebody's going to have to talk me down here, But anyway, we're real glad to be here. But I was not exactly on my A game last night. But we're going to try to talk about 4, 5, 6, and 7. But just to recap a little bit of what we've covered, we're 6 minutes into it. What we covered in 1, 2, and 3, it is so important, and at the risk of getting in trouble, I just want to talk about that the book and a lot of the message that we like to deliver is that one of the most common mistakes that I see in working people through the steps these days, if I'm working people through the steps off the wall, is to say, are you powerless over alcohol and your life is unmanageable? And they'll go, yes. Are you willing to believe that there might be a power greater than yourself? Yes. And if that person says yes, then let's get down on our knees and do the 3rd step prayer. That was my first experience through the steps, and that's how I wound up in a program that was based on abstinence from alcohol, because the book takes a right turn at page 60 that I missed for a long time in recovery. That's what Katie was talking about earlier, but what it does is it switches from it being a problem of a physical allergy and a mental obsession, all that stuff. The book doesn't mention a spiritual malady until we get to page 64. And to me, that's what drives the mental obsession, is that, there's something that makes me so uncomfortable sober that drinking looks like a good idea again, right? Does that make sense? I don't just pick it up again just 'cause, I've got something driving me into that mental obsession. When it gets down to talking about self and self-centeredness, it's funny because it mentions it twice. It says we were at step 3 twice, and it says over on page 60, the first requirement is that we be convinced that any life run on self. They know that we don't have the information at that point to be convinced that any life run on self can hardly be a success. So they say, what do we mean by that, and exactly what do we do? And they spend the next couple of pages talking about what they mean by any life based on self can hardly be a success. And then it says, what do we do? And when it gets, I got to believe what it says in there about, that Katie covered so well, about selfishness and self-centeredness being the root of my problems. Because Chuck Chamberlain used to tell a story about a guy. We got to know what the root of the problem is before we can treat it. Remember when we talked about problem, solution, and program of action? There was a guy that was scared of dogs his whole life, and he was doing inventory when he came in, and he realized that he'd been, when he was a kid, one of the neighborhood dogs had bit him. So he'd been scared of dogs his whole life. Well, when he got to looking at it a little further, he remembered that there was a little girl in the neighborhood that he was chasing her across her yard when her dog came out and bit him. And he said, all my life I'd been running from dogs and chasing women, and dogs never were my problem. It's kind of like that with alcoholism. If I'm running from alcohol and living in self, I don't even know that I'm addressing the wrong problem. So when I'm, abstinent from alcohol but not dealing with selfishness and self-centeredness, It's whack-a-mole, like Chris was talking about. It's just, as these problems pop up in my face, we try to deal with them, but we ain't really fixing the internal condition. So that's what we're going to try to get into in step 3, because, the deal in step 3, the book is going to take me back to it and take me back to it and take me back to it. You'll see it throughout the rest of the work. There's 3 parts of the deal. Katie mentioned it. The first part is that I'm going to quit playing God because it didn't work, right? It says it's a practical program. If me running a show is working real good, rock on, But if it ain't working too good, I got to get out of the God business and let God manage the deal. And then it says, it gives me like 3 examples of He's the Father, we are His children, He's the director, we are His agent, He is the principal, we are His agent, that sort of thing. And then that part, I love the part where Katie talks about the terms of the deal. That the first part of the deal is I'm going to quit playing God. The second part is stay close to Him, perform His work well, He'll give me what I need. That's the deal in step 3. I'm out of management. Stay close to Him, perform His work well. Well, now see how, you remember when we talked about, the reason I say that this is so important is because if you take a person from step 2, admitting that there might be a power, right into the 3rd step prayer, they miss this whole piece of work, which is the root of our problem, which is going to be the basis of the rest of the work. Does that make sense? He's not. So when you do the 3rd step prayer and you say, the first time I said, relieve me of the bondage of self, it just sounded like a bunch of churchy talk, relieve me of the bondage. Now, if I've been marched through these 3 pages in depth, and I see that self is killing me in the way that I try to arrange the show and get everybody to do this and that and how they see what I'm doing, well, now when I say relieve me of the bondage of self, that I could better do your will, it means something. You with me? Does that make sense? So check it out. The reason I have to talk about that a little bit before we go into step 4 is down at the bottom. It says, it talks about after we've done the 3rd step prayer, it says this was only a beginning, though if honestly and humbly made, an effect, sometimes, this is at the bottom of 63, an effect, sometimes a very great one, was felt at once. Anybody feel a great effect from doing a 3rd step prayer with a sponsor? Absolutely, I did. It says you could feel a great effect from taking that 3rd step prayer, but guess what? Will not keep me sober. It says, next we launched out on a course of vigorous action, the first step of which is a personal house cleaning. I used to think the course of vigorous action was the personal house cleaning. The course of vigorous action is steps 4 through 9, and then rolling into 10 and 11 and 12, but the real meat of it is 4 through 9. But the first step of that course of action is the 4th step. People talk about how long do you wait to do the 4th step? How long? If somebody asked me one time, do you push people through the steps really fast? And I'm like, I don't know. Sometimes it can take a week. Sometimes it can, but I'm definitely not a step a month guy, because I don't see that indicated in the book. You remember how we rolled from powerlessness into step 2, into step 3? And now listen to what it says about step 3. There's 2 time references on when to start step 4. The first step of which was a personal house cleaning, which many of us had never attempted. So it says at the top of that paragraph, on the bottom of 63, it says, next, we launched out on a course of vigorous action. So there's a time reference, right? Next. Though our decision, what decision? The 3rd step decision was a vital and crucial step. I've got a 1936 Webster's dictionary up here, and sometimes it's interesting to look up like what vital and crucial mean, but vital is like your vital signs, critical to life, and crucial is terribly important. Though our decision, that decision we just made in 3rd step, was a vital and crucial step, it could have little permanent effect unless at once followed by a strenuous effort to face and to be rid of the things in ourselves which had been blocking us. So the 2 time references on when to start a 4th step are next and at once. And you can pick any time in between there, if you want. But I don't see anything, that says chill for a while, or let step 3 soak in real good, or so, it says next we launched it on this course of vigorous action. Now, if you think about I like to think sometimes, the more I study this book, I like to think about the way it rolls, the way they roll it out, because it's fascinating to me that these guys were able to write the whole recovery program in 103 pages. I mean, if you asked me and Chris and Katie and Karen and Julie to sit down and write the recovery program, it would be in volumes. I mean, but they did it in 103 pages. So what did they find important to lay out in that 103 pages if they're giving me this practical program showing exactly how they recovered? Well, in step 1, we got the problem, and in step 2, we've got the solution. Now, if the problem is lack of power, and the solution is power, right? What they're doing now is removing the stuff that's blocking me from the power. When I'm working with guys, I draw this pipeline, and I got God on one end of that pipe, and me on the other end of that pipe, right? My pipe is full of resentment and fear and guilt and remorse and shame and more fear and more resentment and stuff like that. And I do that in a little drawing, and I go, now what we're going to try to do in this inventory is remove the things that are blocking me from God, at least enough to where there can be a little flow through that pipe, and so that's what we're doing in this course of vigorous action, is removing the stuff that's blocking me. But now listen, you remember when I told you that I missed the whole self piece in the first time for a long time? And I don't know how, but I think a lot of it was I wasn't really hammering the book, and I didn't have anybody pointing it out, saying, what you're running up against is self-will and self and that sort of thing. But what is required for me to do that is I have to read the book, and when I see something that I agree with, I nod my head. And when there's something that doesn't, I just kind of shine it on, And there's a lot of stuff that I look back on it now and I go, what the hell did I used to do when I would come across this line in the book? What did I do? I mean, did I just go, blah, 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 blah? Because listen to what it says. There's some information here, and then it says, about fact-finding, fact-facing process, we got to get rid of the stuff that's blocking us, and that sort of thing. Get rid of the junk, if I'm going to have take an inventory at work, I don't want to keep all my old 8-track tape players and Betamaxes, because they're brand new. I got to be realistic about the value of this stuff. But listen to what it says. We did exactly the same thing with our lives. We took stock honestly. First, we searched out the flaws in our makeup, which had caused our failure. Being convinced that self, manifested in various ways, was what had defeated us, we considered its common manifestations. What? When I'm skipping self and the problem is alcohol, what the heck did I do when I read that line? It says, being convinced that self was what had defeated me, we considered its common manifestations. And you remember we talked about manifestations means the way something shows up. So all the fourth step is a consideration of manifestations of self. Does that make sense? If my problem is self, how does it show up? Right? We ain't talking about vodka anymore. It's talking about self, and it says, how does self show up in Charlie's life? And it says resentment is the number one offender. See how it's starting to roll out now? We're removing the stuff that's blocking me. Self is what's blocking me. And it says the first thing on that list is resentment. It says it kills more drunks than anything. I think it's brilliant that they start off with resentment, because any good drunk can tell you who they're pissed off at. When I come in the door, I may not be able to tell you what I'm afraid of, or I may not want to talk about, guilt and remorse and that sort of thing. But if you ask me who I'm mad at and what they did, we're fixing to have a conversation, because I've been practicing that one on a bar stool for a while, And so when we get in, now listen, check it out. At the bottom of 64 is the first time the spiritual malady is mentioned in the work. It says resentment's the number one offender. It destroys more alcoholics than anything else. From resentment, stem all forms of spiritual disease. For we've been not only mentally and physically ill, we've talked a lot this morning about the mental and the physical aspects of the disease, right? But it says, we have been spiritually sick. When the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. That's a big deal right there. Because what it's saying is we can't address it mentally or physically and overcome it. We address the spiritual malady and then we straighten out physically and mentally. Whereas 10 pages ago, my biggest problem was the mental and the physical aspects of the disease, and they still are, but what it's saying is that we can't fix it with that approach. What we do is we address the spiritual malady, and that straightens us out mentally and physically. Pretty good stuff. Mm-hmm. Well, it says, in dealing with, this book has promised me clear-cut directions, right? Let's see if we find any. In dealing with resentments, we set them on paper. Oh, can I type it on my laptop, Charlie? Let's see what the book says. In dealing with resentments, we set them on paper. Can I just think about them and talk to you about it at the coffee shop tomorrow? Let's see what it says. In dealing with resentments, we set them on paper. Yeah. Well, now, I tell my guys, when you're doing this work here, look for information in an information paragraph, and if you come across an action, take that action right now. Don't go, like I love the way Chris says, when we study calculus, I don't read the whole calculus book and go, oh boy, how about that calculus, huh? I gotta, as I'm going along, I do this exercise, and the exercise is in chapter 1, and then I'm ready for the exercise in chapter 2, and I do the exercise in chapter 2, and I'm ready for the exercise in chapter 3. Same way here. If you see an action, take it right then. But listen to what it says. We listed people, institutions, or principles with whom we were angry. I can stop right there and be busy for a while. One of the things that used to confuse me is, am I the only one that looked at this 3-column thing, right here on page 65 and went, what? Mr. Brown and, this stuff. Well, the reason it confused me was because I would look at it. First of all, I don't read the rest of the stuff. I just pick up the book and go look at it and go, well, that's very unclear, But when I sit down with somebody that's actually done the work out of the book, what I find out is it doesn't go across like this. Mr. Brown, what he did, how it affected me. It goes like this. Down like this, down like this, down like this. Now, when I do a 4-step with somebody, I'll tell them, get out a spiral notebook, open it up with 2 pages are open in front of me, and draw a line vertically right down the middle of each page. Then we got 4 columns right there. In column 1, we're going to write a name, skip a line, write a name, skip a line, write a name, skip a line, write an institution, skip a line, write a principle, skip a line, just like that, all the way down column 1. Listen to what it says. We listed people, institutions, or principles with whom we're angry. Pretty clear, right? I write them all down. Then what? Number 2, we asked ourselves why we were angry. That's column 2. So, what did they do, right? I go to column 2 now and I write. Now, here's an interesting thing that I like to point out. We're talking about bullet points here. Believe me, your sponsor loves you, but they don't want to hear your whole life story in a 4th step. We don't want to hear day 1, I was born. Day 2, had, bananas for breakfast. Look at what it says. When you get over here to let's take Mr. Brown for a while. He's in column 1, it's Mr. Brown. That's who the resentment's at. Look at what he did. His attention to my wife, right? Told my wife I got a girlfriend. He's trying to get my job at the office. One of my favorite AA pieces of thing, I saw a T-shirt one time that said, Mr. Brown needs his ass kicked. But, the thing about it is, you look at, this guy has got a barn burner of a resentment against Mr. Brown because what's he doing? He's hitting on his wife. He told his wife that he's seeing somebody else on the side, and he's trying to get his job at the office. All right? 19 words. He got 19 words. Out of all the stuff that he has to be mad at him about, he got 19 words. We're talking about bullet points here. We're not talking about writing the whole life story. We're talking about sitting on my wife, trying to get my job, told my wife I got a girlfriend. See what I'm saying? We're doing bullet points here. Well, what do we do next? In most cases, it was found that our self-esteem, this is at the bottom of 64, y'all. In most cases, it was found that our self-esteem, our pocketbooks, our ambitions, our personal relationships, including sex, were hurt or threatened, so we were sore, we were burned up, we were pissed. All right? On our grudge list, we set opposite each name our injuries. This is column 3, right here. When we get to that third column, was it our self-esteem, our security, our ambitions, our personal or sex relations, which had been interfered with? We were usually as definite as this example. And I love what a friend of mine says where he goes, well, if you can't come up with anybody that you resent, he says, why don't you just start with the people that you feel smugly superior to? You know? And now we've expanded the list a great deal because I know I'm not supposed to be resentful, but there are plenty of people that I just feel smugly superior to. Well, we went back through our lives. Nothing counted but thoroughness and honesty. Now, I wanted to point out something here. When I came out of the treatment center, I remember one time this girl, Big Book Barbie from California, had told me, I went to a meeting and it was a young people's meeting and there were a lot of very pretty people there, and out of all the people, I picked this girl and I go, I'm single at the time, and I go, anybody going to coffee after the meeting? And they go, yeah, we usually go over here to JoJo's. Well, out of all the women in this room, I wound up with Big Book Barbie, and everybody else is over there having fun and laughing and talking, and Big Book Barbie is hammering my ass. She's like, where are you at in the steps? Have you done an inventory? Why not? And you think you're alcoholic or not? Well, sure, I'm alcoholic. Then why haven't you done it for? Are you turning your life over or not? I mean, you say you've turned your life over. Act like you've turned your life over. If there's an indicated action, why haven't you taken it yet? Do you really think you're powerless or not? Do you think or maybe you're almost powerless? And then she says, have you done an inventory yet? And I said, well, no. And the truth was, I was gathering data because I was going to get the Hazelden guide, and I was going to get the guide from the treatment center I'd been to, and then I'd heard there's this other guide that was like 200 questions that said stuff like, have you ever seen your mother naked? And, just deeply psychological questions. And I was going to compile all this stuff together, and I was going to do a fourth step that would be talked about around AA campfires for generations, But she said, have you ever considered doing that out of the Big Book? And I was like, no, not at all. How do you do that? So the only way I'll use a guide today is if it follows the language of the Big Book exactly, because what I want is if a guy comes up to me and says, once I've done this fourth step, if a guy comes up to me and says, hey, have you had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps? And I go, yeah. And he says, can you show me how to do the work? And I'm like, yeah, get your Big Book. I don't want to have to go and compile a bunch of fourth-step guides and stuff like that, but in order to show somebody how to do a fourth step out of the Big Book, I have to have done a fourth step out of the Big Book. Does that make sense? That's the way the message is going to have that depth and weight that we're talking about, and it's a very simple process. Sometimes I think we look at the steps and we hear people in the meetings talking about the tremendous results that they've had as a result of working these steps, and we think it can't be that easy. It's got to be a big, involved process. Surely I've got to write hundreds and hundreds of pages of work on there, but it is a very simple process, and I think if we're in any danger at all in our fellowship, it's the danger of overcomplicating it rather than not doing it thorough enough. People aren't out there dying because they're not doing the fourth step properly. They're dying out there because they're not doing the fourth step at all. They're just going to, so get somebody in this process and get them through the work. If I believe what it says on page 24, that I'll be unable to call to mind the pain, the suffering and humiliation of a week or a month ago with sufficient force, I'm going to be powerless over the first drink. If I believe that, I believe we got a window of time to get that person involved with the power. Does that make sense? And if we're going to hook them up with the power, we got to remove what's blocking them from the power. So I really think that there's clear-cut directions in here, but I like to get the guy out. But you remember when I said I won't just do a fifth step? I like to get a guy through and make sure he understands what the disease of alcoholism is, that he knows that it's a lack of power, and that that he can't manage the decision not to drink, that he gets involved with the power, that he does a third step, that he sees that the problem is self, and that we're gonna try to make this new deal where I'm out of the God business. And believe me, I'll spend the rest of my life looking at where I'm in the God business and how does self show up. I love how Katie says that I can, when you start focusing on self, the first place it's going to become obvious is in y'all. I can see it. Oh, I can see it in Katie. Oh boy. Now, but in me, I'm blind to it. That's why, because I know about my motives, and I know that I'm really trying to do the right thing. So when I'm telling her how to load the dishwasher, that's not me playing God. That's just, damn it, that's just managerial thinking, and I'm just trying to efficiently load the dishwasher, and that's me. But I don't see it as me running the whole show. I mean, never. If I give you a job, I want to kind of look over the shoulder and go, if I was doing it, I'd do it a little different, And we talk about the way self shows up. One of our favorite stories is about story stealing, in AA, where Katie pointed out to me, she's very generous with her input to me. And she pointed out story stealing to me. And I was like, what are you talking about? She goes, well, we'll be at a party. And somebody will come up and they go, hey, how you doing? I'm getting ready to go to Costa Rica next week. And I go, Costa Rica? Yeah, I've been to Costa Rica. I went to Costa Rica twice, actually. I went down there with some buddies of mine. We played golf. We went whitewater rafting. We did some hiking around and stuff. We rented motorcycles and rode up through the coffee plantations. This is awesome, man. Hey, listen, got to go. And then I walk away. And this poor bastard's standing there. He still ain't told his Costa Rica story. And Katie's standing there going, I'll listen to your Costa Rica story, and that's the way, that's just the tip of the iceberg of how selfish and self-centered I am, is that there was a point in my sobriety when I would just have to force myself to ask you a question about you and act like I gave a flip about the answer, where you just have to go, how are the kids? How you doing? Well, okay. You want? She's going to make me tell the red truck story. Katie's was, when we say we were best friends for 20 years, we're not exaggerating. We were like brother and sister for 20 years. And, and there was zero sexual innuendo, zero sexual energy. It was like a kid sister, and now, there was a lot of teasing that went on, and that doesn't always translate well into a relationship. But the whole pulling the pigtails thing is not nearly as funny as it used to be. But we were like literally best friends for 20 years, and the idea of smooching on each other you'd be like, what? Well. It was also the first female friend I'd ever had, especially at that level. Well, her husband gets a brain tumor, and I'm going to talk about the way self shows up in my life in sobriety, because I am 10 years sober at this point, 12 years sober.
Oh, no. About 15.
I'm about 15 years sober at this point, and Katie's husband is in the hospital. He's going into surgery the next morning to have a brain tumor the size of an orange removed from inside of his head. And I had gotten a new Chevrolet pickup truck that day, a brand new, bright red, super cab Chevrolet pickup truck, chrome rims, diamond plate toolbox, chrome rack, alarm system, sweet. And so I go down to the hospital, and we're talking about, but hey, guess what? I got a new pickup today. And I force Katie into coming down from that hospital room to the parking lot to look at my new pickup truck. I didn't know I was doing anything that day. I just wanted to see the goddamn pickup truck, but that's the level of self-centeredness that I carry around in my life, sober, So when we talk about selfish and self-centered, it's like, never mind your husband's brain tumor, you got to check out my new pickup truck. That's just the tip of the iceberg of why I need a sponsor talking to me about how self shows up in my life, because I ain't going to catch it all in the fourth step, but that's what we're focusing on. And now the thing about the fourth step is that when it says we went back through our lives, the first thing that was apparent was that the world and its people were often quite wrong. To conclude that others were wrong was as far as most of us ever got. The usual outcome was that people continued to wrong us and we stayed sore, right? Page 66 is a hell of a page because it's going to threaten my life about 5 or 6 times on this page. We're not jacking around when we're talking about resentment here. It doesn't say it's a little bit of a problem. It says it's plain that a life which includes deep resentment leads only to futility and unhappiness. To the precise extent that we permit these, do we squander the hours that might have been worthwhile. But with the alcoholic, whose hope is the maintenance and growth of a spiritual experience. So what's my only hope as a recovering alcoholic? It says right here, whose hope is the maintenance and growth of a spiritual experience. Didn't we establish that in step 1? That my only shot of this thing, this hopeless condition in mind and body, was a spiritual experience? It says my only shot is the maintenance and growth of this spiritual experience. The business of resentment is grave. We found that it is fatal. That's kind of serious, For when harboring such feelings, we shut ourselves off from the sunlight of the Spirit, the insanity of alcohol returns, and we drink again, and with us to drink is to die. If we were to live, we had to be free of anger. So this is really only important for the ones of us that want to live. If you're fixing to die, you can skip this step. But it says if I'm going to live, I got to be free of anger. The grouch and the brainstorm were not for us. This is a beautiful example of where this 1936 dictionary comes in handy, because if you look up brainstorm in here, it doesn't mean what we think it means, of getting everybody together and whipping up a great idea. You know what brainstorm means in here? A sudden and violent mental outburst. So when they're talking about brainstorm, they're talking about rage. Sudden and violent mental outburst. So, here's where it gets pretty, foot. Well,
finish and then I'll whip it.
Well, he can run it up. Well, I'm sorry, we're checking timing here. This is where it gets really interesting. Down at the bottom of 66, I think, like Chris was talking about this confessional experience that we have in the fourth step, there's some powerful stuff that happens in that process. But the real power of the fourth step, I've never seen. This prayer and this piece of work we're about to see at the bottom of 66, I've never seen it on one fourth step guide anywhere. So pay attention for just a second here. It says, we turn back to the list, for it held the key to the future. We were prepared to look at it from an entirely different angle. And I'd look at my sponsee, once they've done the first 3 columns, I do the 4th column with them. And I'll go, are you prepared to look at this from an entirely different angle? And make them answer that question, because obviously looking at it from the angle they've been looking at is not getting them anywhere. Well, listen what it says. We began to see that the world and its people really dominated us. In that state, the wrongdoing of others, fancied or real. So whether I think my wife's cheating on me or she is cheating on me, the effect on me is the same. Does that make sense? So fancied or real, these problems can kill me. And it says, we saw that these resentments must be mastered. How could we escape? We could not wish them away any more than alcohol. You know why we can't wish them away? Lack of power. We're up against lack of power again. I, on my own power, cannot just go, by golly, I should be less resentful. because it's in my DNA, So it says this was our course. How come this isn't ever in a 4-step guide? Listen to what it says. This was our course. We realized that the people who wronged us were perhaps spiritually sick. Though we didn't like their symptoms and the way they disturbed us. Their symptoms are how they wronged us in column 1. The way they disturbed, or in column 2. The way they disturbed us are column 3. Right? It's as though we didn't like their symptoms and the way they disturbed us, they, like ourselves, were sick too. I don't get to stand up on this spiritual hilltop and look down on this poor little sick heathen, and say, oh, bless his heart, he is spiritually sick. It's saying just like I need slack for the actions that I took, that I'm needing forgiveness for, am I willing to hand any of that out? Is there a chance, when we say spiritually sick, is there a chance that this person at that time, given their background and the tools they had to deal with, is there a chance they were doing the best they could? Is there a possibility that they were doing the best? And you hear people in the meeting say when we present somebody, we pray for them. That's in the back of the book. That's in one of the stories in the back of the book. But in the instructions in the big book, it doesn't say that. It says, we can pray for them, but we're going to have to say 2 prayers, because what the prayer here says is we ask God to help us show them the same tolerance, pity, and patience that we would cheerfully grant a sick friend. When a person offended, we said to ourselves, this is a sick man. How can I be helpful to him? God save me from being angry. Thy will be done. We avoid retaliation or argument. We wouldn't treat sick people that way. Here we go again. This whole thing is about helping others, right? I keep trying to find, I don't have time to get into how peeved I get when I hear this is a selfish program, because the book doesn't indicate that anywhere. There's one letter from Bill where he talked about that, but it's saying this is all about me helping God's kids and about me being of maximum service. Why do I avoid retaliation or argument? Why wouldn't I treat sick people that way? Because it says if I do, I destroy my chance of being helpful. I can't be helpful to everybody, but at least God will show me how to take a kindly and tolerant view of each and every one. Now we're about to roll into the 4th column. But you see that piece of work that we did that took us from who we're mad at, what they did, and how it affected me? See how we have recentered my spirit. We've gotten me back into a place where I'm looking at maybe they were doing the best they can. I'm into a forgiving spirit. Now I'm ready to look at this list from an entirely different angle. You see what they're talking about now when they say looking at it from an entirely different angle? Then it says, referring to our list of, again, putting out of our minds the wrongs others had done, we looked for our own mistakes. I think that's critical, because how many people have heard the people say, 4th column is where I look at my part, or I look at my part, what's my part in this thing? If you've got a part in a resentment, and if Katie's got a part in a beef, and I've got a part in a beef, and you tell me to look at my part, whose part do you think is going to be bigger? Absolutely. My part's going to be about that big, And so it's saying it doesn't matter what she did. My sponsor says if I only am responsible for 20% of a resentment, I have to take 100% ownership of that 20%. I'm putting out of their mind, because my resentments aren't going to kill them. My resentments are going to kill me. It ain't like if I'm pissed at them, they're not the ones that are going to get drunk. I am, if I don't deal with this stuff. So now it's saying we look for our own mistakes. Where had we been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and frightened? These are the things we're looking for in the 4th column. Though a situation had not been entirely our fault, we tried to disregard the other person involved entirely. Where was I to blame? The inventory was mine, not theirs. When we saw our faults, we listed them. We placed them before us in black and white. Remember that clear-cut directions we're talking about? That's pretty darn clear, wouldn't you say? Write them down. We admitted our wrongs honestly and were willing to set these matters straight. Well, I like to, go in pretty heavy detail about the resentment inventory, but that's the way the resentment inventory rolls out. The fear inventory is really pretty simple, because remember when we said that the inventory was looking at manifestations of self? How did self show up? right? Next, it tells me to write down all my fears. All right, I'm wearing everybody out. You know, this is taken to, but I'm gonna blast through the fear super fast. It tells me to write down all my fears, and then it says, we asked ourselves why we had them, and then it says, wasn't it because self-reliance failed me? So here we are again looking at manifestations of self in the fear inventory. My fears are where my self-will has failed. You know, there's a little ball of stuff that I have control over, and anything that falls outside of that little sphere of my control scares me. I can control what I'm going to have for lunch or for a snack, but am I going to get cancer? Are my kids going to be all right? Are things going to turn out okay? Is my mom going to die while we're out of town? Are the kids okay? Is Katie going to stay with me? Am I going to stay sober? These are things that I don't have control over, and anything, when I'm living in self-reliance, anything that I can't control scares me. Does that make sense? So that's where it gets into the thing where it says perhaps there's another way. If we're now on the basis of trusting and relying on God. We trust infinite God rather than our finite selves. And it talks about we ask God to remove our fears and direct our attention to what He would have us be. You know, so the fear inventory is not nearly as involved as the resentment inventory, and then the sex inventory is pretty involved, but I don't have enough time to go into that. But once again, we're looking at manifestations of self when the sex instinct is aroused, because that is an area where there's nearly always selfishness involved. It's a beautiful piece of work, and I really like, having clear-cut directions on that, but I've got to leave Katie some time to do 5, 6, and 7. So thanks for listening.
Hey, thank you. Thank you, honey. Well, first of all, Katie, recovered alcoholic. We had discussed earlier about, the amount of time we take on the steps, and what we're requiring you to have to sit through and try to grasp is a lot of information. I have been on the other side. I've sat through many of these things. I know you're tired after lunch and you're kind of only retaining a certain amount. So I can't stress the importance of these being on tape. I know money can be tight, but let me tell you, this is an investment that will absolutely continue to change the course of your recovery. And it's all on tape. So when you had those moments where you thought, whoa, I didn't even catch what they just said. Whoa, come on, back in the room. It's all on tape over there. Don't miss the opportunity to take advantage of Robert taping this. It's crucial. Charlie and I are big fans of the tapers. They do quite a good job, and what a reasonable deal. They're 2 times that much at the one that we're putting on in Austin. The other thing is Charlie has never cried at the red truck story. That was extremely moving for me. Usually it's always like, honey, tell him the red truck story. Come on, tell him. And then he started to cry, and I thought, well, I didn't see that come. Of course, I did love it. But I didn't see that coming, so it was kind of heavy. And then I also want to back up and say, I can't believe when I was doing the second step that I left out the entire line of lack of power. That was our dilemma. I mean, it's just major part of step 2. But see, that's what I'm saying, is when you're teaching and you're getting it, I mean, it just constantly, you pick out what's happening at the time. And so these are just a little too close.
Come on in.
Okay. So I will say, when Charlie said, sex inventory is manifestations of self because selfishness becomes such a big part of the sex inventory, that's good enough. That'll work. Perfect. I know, honey. This is the part when you're listening to CDs like this, you guys see what's going on, but other people are like, what exactly is happening there? That's okay, honey. That's okay. So what my point is, and this would be during the sex part, wouldn't it? It's like I'm just trying to follow the microphone around here. Yeah. It's terrible, isn't it? I'm sorry. And they always think it's just boys that have that mindset. Can we just contain it better in our minds, you know? We were laughing one time, Charlie and I were saying, I went out on the golf course with the boys. We do this sober event where we raise money for intergroup, and Charlie has all these boys. It's predominantly men playing golf, and I always am in the cart having fun, just giving everybody a hard time. And I went out there and I said, I swear, I just don't even see how you guys can see your balls. I mean, you know, and you just realize that everything is a male, you know, comment, you know, innuendo. And the boys were like, and I thought, very good. You handled that well, boys. I know I led with the chin there. And Charlie goes, you know, boys, they can make anything sexual. Like a girl could say, I need to have my tires rotated. I'll rotate your tires for you, baby. And so what we have is, we women, we think the same way. Yes? Oh, absolutely. We just don't usually make a comment behind it. We're thinking, whew, same thing's going on. It's so funny. Charlie go, Well, in the sex inventory, it's the exact same thing, looking for the manifestations of self. However, and this is my opinion, I believe the difference between a male's sexual drive and a female's sexual drive, there are very different manifestations of self. Yes? We are looking for power and to be taken care of. They are looking for the act of more or less. That's generalizing it greatly. But do understand that when you're the woman talking about the sexual inventory, there is a tremendous amount of power in the poontang. There we go, I said it. So, we're just going to move on. And so, I know everybody's like, but the truth, that is the truth of the matter, and I don't even think we need to expound any more on that, do we? We all know what we're talking about. So now you're going into the fifth step, guys, and here is, we're speaking up where? In Atlanta? We're speaking in Atlanta together, doing a big book study, and... I'm sorry, were you speaking to me? And the guy says, we really want Katie to talk with the women.
We were thinking about lack of power.
We really want Katie to speak to the women. And I said, what's the topic? And he goes, the power of the poontang. And I thought, but it is a very good point. Yes? Oh, yeah. And when we're all the women together, we can talk more freely. So.
Yeah, but she's not going to call the seminar on that.
Yeah, well, the boys wanted to call it that. So, the fifth step. Now, I'm so glad this is all on tape. The fifth step, guys, there is, how many of y'all have never actually been on the other side of a fifth step, have heard a fifth step? Raise your hand if you have not heard a fifth step.
Come on.
Yeah, it's okay, you're not being graded. Yeah, and so when you're on the other side of it, it's completely different than sharing an inventory with your sponsor. I mean, all of a sudden, you're looking for these things. You will be shocked at what comes up. You'll be shocked at what you see. Now, your job as a sponsor, remember I told you this is all about teaching us to be better sponsors, yes? If the book says it's about carrying the message, then we better figure out how to carry that message. So we, in fact, have to clear out that path over there. See, Charlie uses it as a pipeline. I use it as a river. So you've got this beautiful river, but in the river are these huge logs going down there. There's debris in there. It's damming up in certain spots. And then you look over at somebody that you really like their program in AA. Their river's pretty darn clean periodically. There's a log floating down it, but overall, man, they've got something you want. Yes, you know what I'm saying when you see that? And so what we got to do, we got to clean out that river, man. That river's, it's actually quite dangerous because you never know. You know, when the book talks about pause when agitated, that's a promise. It ain't pausing if you ain't spiritually fit. You know, I mean, it's a crapshoot. You may actually be able to contain it, but you're going to kick the dog or slap the kid. You know what I mean? It's coming out somewhere. And so there's a lot of of things that are just kind of thrown around in meetings. Let's talk about pause when agitated, and you're like, look, I'm starting to sound like Chris now, where I get that alter ego voice going on. Did you hear that? Are we creatures of just next thing you know, if I'm in France, I'll start sounding like I'm French. So, but what happens in the fifth step is you are sitting there. I always love to do the set-aside prayer before I ever start, because I have to be aware that sometimes I can get into these rituals, selfish, self-centered, blah, 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 and I miss that God's trying to talk to me through this, because sometimes when it says that my thought life will be placed on a higher plane, lots of times I can see a lot of things, and, everybody's always saying, well, God better speak through you. We're all doing fine together with that. But I have to keep that vessel open myself and realize that there are times that God's coming through. And so at this fifth step process, I need to be sure that you are willing to look at this entirely different. I will not argue on an inventory. Absolutely will not. If you start getting that real argumentative thing, I said, stop, the process is over. I just won't do it with you because it's exhausting to me. And if you're still in an argumentative stage, I'm not going to move you. I'm going to do